Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here. Now in Final Fantasy XIV, the combat gets incredibly engaging towards the later levels, but its early game has often been criticized for feeling slow. While the 2.5-second global cooldown makes sense in the late game, the drip feed of skills early on leaves many feeling like the pace of the game just really isn't for them before they've gotten to see it really flourish and become what it becomes. Today I want to tackle how I think this could be improved. Bear in mind, there's no indication anything like this is going to happen, but the way I see some jobs designed, especially around the level 30 to 50 range, and the way some jobs seem almost kind of ignored at those level ranges, really makes me want to analyze and assess what they could do to make that early game feel a little bit more engaging. And no, we're not just going to suggest they drop the GCD. Again, it works way too well at the late levels, so it's just about making it feel better at the early levels. So for this, I want to use two basic principles in order to determine how we can improve the gameplay experience. For one, I'd like to move core job mechanics to earlier level ranges. Some jobs get their job gauges fairly early on, and others don't. I really feel like we need to unify this and make sure that at least some form of job gauge is available as early as level 30 or 35. This makes so that some of the base jobs, when they advance from class to job, feel like a real advancement and more exciting. It also teaches the player earlier on and really tries to get them to engage with the actual job mechanics instead of just throwing them into it between levels 50 and 80 somewhere. And to do this, I want to follow principle number 2. They've really shown an aptitude for introducing skills and then powering up those skills later on. And this often comes with some really cool feeling moments. When you go from using Hotshot on Machinist to using Air Anchor, that feels really, really good. And I think we can replicate this to make early game skills, introduce core job mechanics, and then make them feel impactful and powerful at the later levels without really changing all too much. So obviously you probably want an example of what I mean. So let's look at a job I'm actually familiar with, in that of Monk. Now, Monk I actually think has a pretty good early game experience. Because of its positionals, it really gets you moving around, and that is a core job mechanic that Monks need to learn. That being said, that doesn't mean it can't be improved. So what could we do? First, let's trim some unnecessary abilities in that of the fist stances. Yeah, we use them, but they're really just a button you click or forget to click and then forget about afterwards. Most people will throw on Fist of Fire while doing content. Yeah, if it's desperate, you can throw on Fist of Earth. And when you're running around town, you probably like Fist of Wind. But honestly, they could just learn these as traits at those levels, and it really wouldn't change the gameplay experience all that much, other than not having to decide which one to click or, again, forget to click. This actually opens up some action slots for us to use earlier on. So with that, I'd like to move Meditation and Forbidden Chakra to level 30 or 35. Now, I don't think we should actually use Forbidden Chakra. I think making a weaker version of Forbidden Chakra for those earlier levels would probably be the way to go. Then you could enhance it at level 54, and it's like you have it now, and really doesn't change anything for those of us at max level. It just gets those into the player's hands as quickly as possible, so they begin learning how that job gauge actually works, and it gives them extra buttons to press so they feel a little bit faster and more fun. Also, Monk used to have a decent amount of off globals at that level range. They used to have Howling Fist, they used to have Steel Peak, and really most of their off globals have moved to later levels. Maybe a weaker version of Elixir Field for the lower level OGCDs as well, and then make the fully stronger version later on. This is, again, something I think they could do for a lot of jobs that maybe don't have as much off global or even on global involvement in those early levels. So let's actually maybe do an example of it. Let me just put exactly the abilities I could imagine Monk having on their bar at level 35 with the suggestions I've made. So let's say they have Meditation. We'll pretend this is a weaker Forbidden Chakra and pretend I have a weaker Elixir Field, and let's see how the job looks at level 35. Also, I suppose I should maybe try it at level 50 because they just get a couple new skills that really round out that base Monk rotation. So let's take a look at what level 50 Monk would look like under these same principles. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but that looks more fun. I don't think this is too complicated for a new player to pick up, too overwhelming in any way, and it starts to really give you a feel for how the GCD is going to work, especially on a faster job like Monk, which really needs to get used to how to use those and where to use those abilities. Now, I could go through a job-to-job example of what this sort of change would look like, but it's not really the same conversation with every job, and I'm not as qualified to be talking about other jobs. Yeah, we could move Blood of the Dragon on Dragoon to level 30 and learn it alongside Jump, but then you'd have to rework the way that it actually is involved in their rotation, and maybe that would be a good thing to get players introduced to it early. Some jobs also, whether they be sinking down from the higher levels or just having them introduced at the earlier levels, already have this kind of principle in place and maybe need deeper job adjustments, like Paladin and Warrior getting their gauge early, but Paladin really not having anything exciting to use it on. Healers actually get a ton of great options early on, but their gauges are introduced way later. We might have to rework the way they learn their early game skills in order to make room for the gauges to actually be introduced at those levels. Honestly, the only other job I could really ramble on about is Black Mage, and I think any Black Mage player will tell you that sinking down feels terrible on those jobs, and thus we probably could just improve the early game experience, make things like Aspect Mastery available early, fix the ability naming convention so it's clearer for new players, and at least maybe get Enochian introduced in the early 30s so players get used to maintaining the buff before they're thrown into the deep end with Blizzard and Fire 4 in the later levels. But please, Square Enix, you have shown that you have the tools to do certain things in this game. Enhancing abilities and making them stronger is probably the best way to get more abilities introduced early on to excite new players without actually increasing button bloat at the later levels to a point where jobs are really too overwhelming to adjust to. They make adjustments to these kind of things every expansion, and I'm really hoping that in Endwalker or sometime after that they really take a look at improving this early game experience with some of the things we've suggested here. But with that, that's going to be a wrap for this video. If you have any suggestions for improving the early game, things that you really think are within reason that Square Enix could implement, definitely put them in the comment section of the video below. I'm sure we all have our own ideas, and it can be kind of fun to discuss these things and maybe hope that in some way they'll hear us and improve that early game experience. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned. We have plenty of stuff before Endwalker comes out in November, and of course, even more after that. But anyway, I'll see you in the next one, and until then, take care.